back like we never left. I'm Stef from Double Move Sports. I'm here as always with Alex Lott, the fantasy phenom. And look, we're going into week 7. You probably know which side of the fence you're on. If you're 6-0, if you're 5-1, if you're a stacked, and I mean like leading the league in points for level stacked, and you're sitting at 4-2, this is the time where you can start to make some moves to line yourself up for the playoff stretch. I'm not saying go and mortgage your whole team for the playoffs, but we're early enough where you can start buying low on guys that could potentially pop. You can address some certain needs on your roster knowing that, hey, I have room to go ahead and burn on a handcuff running back that could pop for me and win me a year. Those are the type of players that we're going to get into today. Before we do, a like and a sub on YouTube. Greatly appreciated if y'all rock with us here on the channel. We got loaded bye weeks, Bills, Cowboys, Vikings, Steelers, Chargers, Jaguars. A lot of fantasy options are not going to be available. But let's start off with our Discord question of the day. If you want to join the conversation with us, contribute to what we talk about here on the show, get your roster looked at, get some start-sit questions answered, hit that Discord channel. But the guys are asking, and we'll answer, is Jaylen Waddle a weekly starter at this point, coming off a 29 PPR point outing with 2 touchdowns against the Jacksonville Jaguars?
Heck yeah, he is. I mean, you called this one, Steph. You said from the jump, really, Jaylen Waddle is going to be the clear number 1 wide receiver on this Dolphins team. And here we are through week 6, and he's right now PPR wide receiver 27, averaging over 8 targets a game. Yes, his average depth of target is low, but a lot of that is driven by Jacoby Brissett, like you and I were just talking about before the pod. Like Tua is willing to get it to Waddle a little bit further down the field.
You could look at the average target distance, but I just need to look at the air yards. This is all you need to know. 66 air yards in week 1 with Tua. After that, 9 air yards, 34 air yards, 18 air yards, 24 air yards. That's brutally low. He was being used like a gadget, check down, near the line of scrimmage, swing screen type receiver. And then what do you know? Tua comes back in the lineup, his Alabama buddy, gets 99 air yards, has the monster game. You see the yardage total go up. You see the efficiency go up. And as much as I hate to kind of dog Jacoby Brissett, I mean, Tua looks better than him, and that's not saying much. But when Tua's on the field, you have to plug in Jaylen Waddle as a weekly flex option, in my opinion, and congratulations if you drafted him late.
I agree. I mean, honestly, when you look at the stat line, like a week 3 against Vegas, when you have 12 receptions for 58 yards, you know there's a problem. Like, that's unbelievable. But the thing is, like, in these PPR leagues, that's still hyper valuable. He's getting such a massive target share in this offense. He's someone you have to throw out there in PPR leagues. Last week in week 6, we saw the breakout against Jacksonville, 10 for 70 and the 2 touchdowns. The thing about Waddle, not only does he have this gadget player ability, like we saw him be an absolute special teams beast in college. We see him used around the line of scrimmage, things like that as well. But this guy's got the speed. Like, he can be a burner too. We have not yet seen the Jaylen Waddle that slips up the seam when he's lined up in the slot and burns the safety or the nickel cornerback for a 70-yard touchdown. And I think we will see some of that as the season goes along, especially if Tua continues to be willing to push it down the field. So, quick question of the day from Discord, is Waddle a weekly start? To simplify it, if this is all you're going to watch, yes, I really think he is.
All right, we got 6 players on our list, potential league winners, guys that you can try to go out and acquire if you're 6-0, if you're 5-1, if you're a stacked 4-2. The first one, and a guy that I just acquired, a guy that I'm so excited about for back half of the season purposes, it's Chase Edmonds. Right now, he's 5th amongst all running backs in targets, and Arizona is 6-0. They haven't been in these crazy boat races. They're winning every single game, where we even saw it this week against Cleveland. James Conner gets onto the field because the Cardinals are up a bunch. They're not scared of what the Browns offense is going to do, and 55%, a season-high snap share for James Conner, and a season low for Chase Edmonds. But before that, in games against the Rams, Jacksonville, Minnesota, shootouts with Tennessee, in those games, we're seeing Chase Edmonds on the field 60 to 70% of the snaps, getting 4, 5, 8, 5, 4, 4 targets. His floor is 4 targets a game. We know he can be an explosive playmaker. He's slippery. He's quick. He's playing in the slot. He's running a ton of routes. He's 7th amongst running backs in routes run. You add all that together and you look over, he's still 24th in fantasy points per game. I think the best is yet to come. And we know James Conner isn't exactly the perfect example of full health every single season.
Yeah, for sure. That's the thing about Edmonds. Like, he hasn't really given you everything you wanted when you drafted him, but he's still been great. I mean, you mentioned his rank in points per game. And in PPR leagues, just in straight up points, he's RB17 right now because of that target share that he's getting. And we talked about this earlier as well, Steph. Like, Chase Edmonds, when you think about this Cardinals offense, the dynamic at running back between Chase Edmonds and James Conner, Chase Edmonds is more than a Nyheim Hines. Like, he's more involved as a regular part of the passing game. He's more involved as a regular part of the running game as well. But his value jumps up to the next level in these game scripts where they're trailing, where they're running a 2-minute offense, where they need to put up points quick and they need these checkdowns out of the backfield from Kyler Murray. And James Conner is this grinded out back, probably going to be used in short yardage situations. He's used around the goal line. So that takes away from Chase Edmonds a bit. But when you think about the Cardinals this season, Arizona 6-0. They've been dominating these teams, so they haven't really needed to use Chase Edmonds in that come from behind mode yet. And when we have that game where it's a shootout, where, you know, talk about Green Bay in week 8, maybe the Packers jump out on top of Arizona by 10, 14 points and Kyler's in comeback mode, that could be the type of game where we see Chase Edmonds really realize his ceiling, excuse me. So as we get into these competitive games for the Arizona Cardinals, not going to say they haven't been in competitive games so far this season, but they've done a pretty good job of really dominating these teams and just grinding out that clock with James Conner. I think we'll continue to see Chase Edmonds get more and more involved and just see that ceiling continue to rise when they actually need to rely on him late in some of these games.
He has two pieces that could just go right for him, where he could just have gasoline poured on his fire, which would be James Conner going down. I'm sure Eno Benjamin steps into some of that work, but I don't think Eno Benjamin's taking the goal line carries. Now, that might be Kyler Murray, which we've seen before, and that's one of the downsides with Edmonds, but I think the touchdown upside's still there. Hasn't scored a touchdown yet on the season, is getting a ridiculous amount of touches. And then we see that the pass volume could go up in the right game scripts. And right now, this is the perfect buy window for Edmonds. 3 points against San Francisco, 8 points against Cleveland. That had to do more with the game scripts than anything Chase Edmonds did. And again, this is a guy that we don't need to see double-digit carries on the ground for us to love him in fantasy. Only averaging 8.8 carries right now. But we just talked about with Cordarrelle Patterson, who's sitting as an RB1 right now, you don't need double-digit carries on the ground if you're getting that passing work. Hopefully the touchdowns hit for Edmonds, and he does become a true league winner down the stretch. Now let's talk about Javonte Williams, another guy that we see as a potential league winner, a guy that we've been all in on in dynasty leagues. Loved him since he was drafted, since the Broncos traded up to grab him in the second round of the draft, and he's delivering right now, not from a fantasy perspective, but for the Broncos. I think the fantasy side of things is soon to come. Javonte Williams is really in a 50-50 split with Melvin Gordon. They're slowly getting Javonte Williams more acclimated in the passing game. He's getting more goal line touches and red zone usage. Before you know it, we're going to look over. I don't know if it's going to take a Melvin Gordon injury. I don't know if it's going to be game scripts. And who knows, maybe it doesn't even happen this year and he stays in the 50-50 split. But what you can do with Javonte Williams is grab him now as nothing more than a deep depth piece and hope that in the back half of the season, he does become the RB1 in Denver, because this is a team that's running the ball a lot, passing the ball to the running back a lot. And Javonte Williams is already showing us what we wanted to see from him coming in the NFL, is that he could be an efficient pass catcher. He's showing that he can do it all. We've comped him, and I think everybody else has comped Javonte Williams to David Montgomery at some point. So if you like David Montgomery, you like the upside for him when he's the only running back there in Chicago, you got to feel the same way for Javonte Williams in Denver. And the lack of proven production over the last couple of years, in a lot of leagues, I think Javonte Williams is being extremely slept on.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is, like, Melvin Gordon hasn't been bad. Melvin Gordon's been solid. His efficiency's been solid. He's been solid through the receiving game. But if you've watched any Denver Broncos games, it's clear and obvious that Javonte Williams can do things at this point in his career that Melvin Gordon just simply cannot do, making highlight reel plays, making defenders miss left and right. So Javonte, I do think right now, just like in a vacuum, is a more talented back. Now, with that being said, I really don't think he's going to take over this backfield on talent alone. Melvin Gordon's in a contract year. Like I said, still playing solid. So it's going to continue to be a split until further notice. But I do think Javonte is that perfect stash, because he's in that category we've talked about a lot on the show. Guys like Kareem Hunt's in the past, where they're high value handcuffs with standalone value. Obviously, Hunt has transcended that, but we think about guys like AJ Dillon. Think about guys like Tony Pollard. Guys where if Aaron Jones got hurt or missed time, if Ezekiel Elliott got hurt or missed time, they're going to absolutely skyrocket in value. And even with the starters in, you can use them as a flex player in a pinch. And Javonte Williams, to me, is by all means in that category, but he's getting more touches and he's getting more of a snap share than the two names I just mentioned. 10 carries, 3 targets a game so far, which is fine if you've got buys. Like here in week 7, there's a lot of buys. So if you've got that issue, you can plug them in. If you've got other guys that are hurt, you can plug them in. So to me, I think Javonte's the perfect stash because he's usable if you need him, but he also does possess that upside if Melvin Gordon were to miss time. And Melvin Gordon is 28 years old, and he's missed games to date in his career. He's been fairly durable, but most seasons he's missed a game here, a game there. So I think Javonte Williams is a great stash. And if I have these players, think about your Khalil Herberts, think about your Devontae Bookers, probably not Darrell Williams. Darrell Williams, I think you might even be able to get more for after the game he had last week. But if you have these short-term rentals, if you will, at the running back spot where the starter is going to be back sooner rather than later and you're not using them in your lineup, you don't need them on a week-to-week basis, those are the kind of names I would look to flip for a Javonte Williams who might give you some upside in the long term.
Love that. And you hit on 2 of the other guys on this list, and I'll add a third on the fly here. It's these high-value handcuffs that have some standalone value. They're not ideal starting options, especially in 12-team PPR redraft leagues, but Tony Pollard, AJ Dillon, and another guy that I think you should keep your eye on, whether you have Christian McCaffrey or not, is Chuba Hubbard, just for that handcuff potential that he's shown that he has already in Carolina with CMC being out. We could be seeing a situation with McCaffrey right now, almost like last year, or think back to Joe Mixon last year where it's like, hey, he's going to come back. And then he never does. We saw 2 straight weeks where they're like, oh, he'll be a game-time decision. It's 50-50. He's week to week, but then goes on the IR after 2 weeks. Doesn't give you a ton of confidence there. So I think Chuba is a guy that you have to keep your eye on, especially if McCaffrey comes back. Go out and try to buy him, especially if the guy who has Chuba isn't a CMC owner, so they're not tied to that handcuff appeal. But Tony Pollard and AJ Dillon, those are guys that you and I were pounding the table for in redraft leagues, and they continue to be guys that you stash. Now, the reason we wanted them in the draft season is because if something happens, let's say to Aaron Jones or Ezekiel Elliott early in the year, then you have that stud handcuff that you can ride essentially the rest of the way throughout the season. For a lot of folks, these are players that might end up on the waiver wire. Now, I don't think Tony Pollard will because he is giving you that PPR floor. AJ Dillon, though, in some shallow leagues, he is ending up on waiver wires. And what we're seeing with AJ Dillon right now, what I believe does give him that standalone value. Because if you look over, he's only had 2 games with double-digit fantasy points coming in week 4 and week 5. Other than that, has had 3, 4, and 5 fantasy point outings. Definitely not a guy that you think, oh, does he have standalone value? But in the right matchups. And I think they're somewhat easy to predict. I think this week in week 7 against Washington is a great example of this. When the Packers are up, they're just feeding the ball to A.J. Dillon to grind out the clock, and A.J. Dillon is being efficient. He hasn't been receiving necessarily the red zone work, but he has a 90% catch rate. He showed us a game where he went 4 for 4 through the air and a touchdown through the air with 49 yards. I like what I've seen from A.J. Dillon. I liked him as a prospect coming in. He's a size speed specimen. You just don't see that much in the league at 6 foot, 247. I think you can plug him in if you're in a desperation situation week 7 with all the buys, and he's a guy that you definitely need to be acquiring because if Aaron Jones goes down, that passing work gives me a lot of confidence that he can take over a large part of that target share, even if Kylan Hill comes in and takes some of it too. Hey guys, real quick, I got to tell you all about a new sports betting software called OddsJam. They use real-time data to spot discrepancies between different sports books to help their users place risk-free bets. Profits average around 3% every day, which adds up to big earnings. If it sounds too good to be true, let me show you how it works. Sometimes the odds in different sports books don't line up with one another. When this happens, you can bet on different outcomes to a single game with different sports books and win no matter what. This is called arbitrage. OddsJam processes over 1 million odds a minute and identifies arbitrage opportunities in real time. Developed by Alex Monahan, an engineer from Stanford that started his career as a trader on Wall Street, OddsJam is an innovative solution designed to identify odds that make you a winner every time. You can check out his video in the link below where he breaks down how he made over $400,000 using the OddsJam software that he built. With OddsJam, there's no catch, just the smartest betting software on the market. Check them out at oddsjam.com and check out some of their free line shopping tools while you're there. Now back to the show.
These other two guys are two guys we can kind of lump together, Tony Pollard and AJ Dillon. I love what you said about both, and you're right. I think Tony Pollard of these two is the one that does have the most standalone value. I mean, I'm sitting here looking through Tony Pollard's numbers from this season.
He had the early season hype.
Yeah,
I mean,
he leads the NFL in yards per carry of all running backs right now. So, I mean, Tony Pollard's been efficient through the air, 15 targets, 15 receptions, 7.6 yards per catch. So, like, Tony Pollard is literally the model of efficiency right now. And in PPR leagues, he's the RB19, 10 carries a game and 3 targets a game as the backup to Zeke, who's still getting a lot of volume of his own. So Tony Pollard is borderline startable if you have other bye weeks or things you're dealing with in deeper leagues, like you said. So I love the Pollard stash. And again, if you have these short-term rentals that you're not using, the Khalil Herberts, the Devontae Bookers, and the team with Tony Pollard needs to win now, maybe you make that flip and you can stash Pollard for some long-term upside. And AJ Dillon, he's starting to get worked in more and more, which I've loved to see. Over the last 3 weeks, 33% or more snaps in each week. He's averaged around 11 carries per game over the last 3 and is getting that passing usage, like you said. So in the right matchups, I certainly do think you can put AJ Dillon out there if you're in an emergency. But I'm with you. I think Tony Pollard, AJ Dillon, these are guys I absolutely want on my roster down the stretch because as this season wears on, as this longer season wears on, we are going to see, unfortunately, it's part of the game, we're going to see some of these guys, especially running backs, especially veteran running backs, get worn down and miss some games. So players we've talked about like Javonte Williams and now Tony Pollard and AJ Dillon, I definitely want on my bench.
So we've talked about 4 running backs. Let's talk about 1 wide receiver and 1 quarterback. But the receiver is Rashod Bateman. We saw him come in off of a core muscle surgery in a brutal game. It was smashed the under in that Baltimore Ravens LA Chargers game. Unfortunately, that burned me in a lot of DraftKings lineups. But you look over and Rashod Bateman, number 1 on the Ravens in targets amongst the wide receivers, out targeting Hollywood Brown. 6 targets, caught 4 of them for 29 yards. Doesn't raise eyebrows as far as that overall stat line. But I think Sammy Watkins' target share is easily attainable for Rashod Bateman, and that was looking like 7 targets a game. And I don't think it's impossible for Hollywood Brown and Rashod Bateman to both produce. I think right now you can continue to try to buy low on Rashod Bateman if people don't believe, if they say, oh, this is a run-first team. Hollywood Brown's been on a tear. He's broken out. I'll get rid of Bateman. I think he's worth taking the upside shot on if you can get him at a decent enough value. I'm not saying go out and overspend for him. Don't move a guy that's in your starting lineup today. But if he's a guy that you can go pick up and just stash on your bench, see if he breaks out in the back half of the season, especially when you have Hollywood Brown due for some touchdown regression, 23rd in target share, but top 10 in receiving yards, something's got to give, I believe, with Hollywood Brown. I know that's the type of player that he is, but he can continue to play that field stretcher role, that guy who is a game breaker when the defense doesn't get back in coverage. But Rashod Bateman, I think, can step in and be that high target possession receiver that the Ravens have desperately needed for a while.
Yeah, Steph, I like Bateman a lot. He was someone we did talk about a ton in the draft process. And I really believe the Ravens want to get him involved. And that's what we saw in this first game of his NFL career. Did love the snap share, did love the target share in this game. And for Bateman, it really does all come down to how much are the Ravens going to throw the ball down the stretch, and are they going to need to give him 6, 7, 8 targets a game? Because if Bateman can get there, if he can get to that 7, 8 targets that we were seeing from Sammy Watkins early in the season, he's someone I absolutely want on my rosters down the stretch, someone who can be used in these deeper leagues as a flex. Who knows, maybe he'll even bust out from an efficiency standpoint and from a touchdown standpoint, and we'll see him really emerge as a wide receiver 2 by the end of the season. And for the price tag he probably has right now in your leagues, he's by all means someone I'm willing to buy low on. He's probably on a lot of waiver wires right now. So first of all, check that out. And if Bateman's there, just pick him up and stash him on your bench. Hopefully you were able to do that before he came back. But if not, I would send out an offer to whoever has him. I mean, you wait on Rashod Bateman for all this time, or you stash him before he plays. And from a fantasy perspective, if you're not reading between the lines, if you don't know what kind of talent this guy is, you see 4 for 29. Like, there's a good chance someone picked him up, saw what happened, and dropped him back to the waiver wire. So he's definitely a buy low. And to me, like, if you think about Odell Beckham Jr.'s rookie season in New York, I know it was a totally different situation. The quarterback situation was different with Eli Manning and the volume, and the whole dynamic was different. But OBJ missed the first 4 games of his career with an injury. And in his first game in week 5 against Atlanta in 2014, he had 4 for 44 and a touchdown on 55% snaps on 5 targets. So you look at Rashod Bateman missing these first 5 games, now coming back, getting involved from a target perspective, getting involved from a snap share perspective. Not saying he's going to have that OBJ rookie season, but just saying it's possible. It's tough for these rookies to get going, especially when they're hurt. But I just want to say it is possible for these rookies to acclimate quickly and become relevant quickly in the NFL. And Rashod Bateman and the talent, the profile that he has, I think it's certainly possible. So of all the guys we're talking about today as these potential league winners, as these potential buy low league winners in a lot of cases, I think Bateman's probably the one you can pick up the cheapest, and he might even be on that waiver wire, like I said.
Broke out at 18.8 years old. Before the age of 19, he was dominating in college at Minnesota in the Big Ten. Had 1,200 yards in 2019 as a sophomore. Then as a junior was on pace in 5 games to do it again. Was literally carrying the team when you had other guys that were NFL caliber talents like Tyler Johnson, who's on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In that wide receiver in Minnesota, you add in the first round draft capital. The Ravens went out and got their guy. He checks a lot of boxes. Measurables wise, 6 foot, runs a 4.48. You love everything as a prospect from Bateman. You bet on the talent profile and the draft capital, telling us that this is a guy that could do crazy things. Not projecting it, but I mean, we're seeing what guys like Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk is a rookie. Rookie wide receivers can produce and don't need a ton to break their way if they are stud players. But let's talk about the last guy on this list. It's a quarterback. It's a rookie. I think everybody knows at this point. I don't even think you can buy this guy low in a lot of spots. But if you can, keep your eyes open. If there's some down games, keep your ears to the streets and try to buy Trey Lance. Try to buy Trey Lance because this is a guy that has double-digit rushing attempt upside every single week. We saw him have 16 rushing attempts for 89 yards in week 5 at Arizona. You know, they're coming off the bye week. They're going to a game against Indianapolis. They have Chicago and then Arizona again. Don't necessarily love all these matchups as far as fantasy high-scoring shootouts, but Shanahan's showing that he's totally willing to let Trey Lance run the ball and run the ball often. If you look back at the game against Seattle when Jimmy G initially got hurt, on 51% of snaps, had 7 rushing attempts. So it was on pace for 14 in his game where he really played more than a 50% snap share. When Lance is on the field, he's getting it done on the ground. You have to love it. And even if you don't think he's going to be great, even if you think he's going to be like Cam Newton on the Patriots last year, where everything was just coming as far as production on the ground, wasn't doing much through the air, that was still enough to be a weekly starter and at worst a streamer that you can plug in the right matchup. Expect big things for Lance, that rocket arm. Yes, the efficiency's been brutal, but we could say the same thing for Josh Allen as a rookie. So crazy things happen. Love Trey Lance as an upside shot that if you can acquire him cheap in any way, especially after some down weeks, maybe even if Jimmy G comes back and is the starter, Lance is a guy that you got to pick up and stash.
Exactly. I think you actually can acquire him cheap. I wouldn't be surprised if people are dropping him in some of these leagues because you think about it, he came in against Seattle in half of a game, 20 fantasy points. Fantastic. Everyone's hyped up about Trey Lance. He gets the start against Arizona, only 15 fantasy points. So a lot of people are probably disappointed. Then you have the bye. Now Trey Lance is a little banged up and Jimmy G is probably going to start. I would not be surprised in the slightest if Trey Lance, if Jimmy G is named the starter for week 7 and Trey Lance is the backup. I really wouldn't be surprised if he's floating around there on waiver wires. I'm looking on ESPN right now. Trey Lance is rostered in 29% of leagues. 29% of leagues, so he might be floating out there. And by all means, pick him up. I'm not scared of the game he had against Arizona. You look at that game, You mentioned the double-digit rushing attempt upside, 16 carries for 89 yards in that game. Like, that's an absolute cheat code for a quarterback. And in a game where he didn't even score a touchdown and threw an interception, he still posted 15 fantasy points. He had a scramble in that game where he was stuffed at the pylon, very, very close to getting a rushing touchdown. And if he punches that in, and that's a 21-point fantasy week, we're looking at Trey Lance totally differently right now. Moving forward, I think we're going to see him have these double-digit rushing games. We're going to see the rushing touchdown upside as well. So I'm all about it. I think whatever he does with his arm is just gravy on top of what he can do with his legs. We saw it from Jalen Hurts last year. We saw it from Kyler Murray the year before. We saw it from Lamar Jackson the year before. Like, these are rookie quarterbacks that come out, they're raw as passers, but because of their ability with their legs, they're able to really get it done from a fantasy football perspective. And that's what Trey Lance is. So if he's on the waiver wire, stash him, even if he's not the starter this week. And if you can buy him on the cheap for some of these other streaming quarterback names, someone I'm definitely trying to pick up.
Especially in 8 and 10 team leagues, and especially in standard leagues, totally trying to get Lance on those rosters to help me win down the stretch. But if you guys like what we do here on the show, a like and a sub, greatly appreciated. You can join the discussion with us. Hit that Discord channel link down below. It's free. We're in there all the time doing exclusive live streams in there, breaking down rosters. So hop in, join the party, and we'll see y'all next time. Peace.